The orbital transit station drifted above the rust-colored planet like a patient metal spider, its long docking arms stretching toward empty space as if hoping to catch passing ships. Most travelers describe the station as efficient. Sophia described it as boring. She sat on a narrow bench near docking bay 12, staring into a cup of station coffee that looked suspiciously like melted wiring insulation. After one cautious sip, she concluded it probably tasted worse than melted wiring insulation. "Congratulations," she muttered to the cup. "You may be the first beverage in the galaxy capable of repairing engines through sheer disappointment." Her transport had been delayed for 7 hours. 7. The announcement board politely called it a temporary scheduling adjustment. Sophia called it a cosmic conspiracy against engineers with nothing to repair. Sophia had spent most of her life moving from station to station, fixing machines that other engineers had declared impossible. Not because she was a genius, although she privately suspected she was slightly better than average, but because she had one particular habit that annoyed nearly every official engineering department in the galaxy. She ignored the manual. To Sophia, manuals were written by people who were afraid of experimenting. Machines, however, were honest. Machines only cared whether something worked, which was why boredom was dangerous, because bored engineers began wandering, and wandering engineers inevitably found broken things. The door to docking bay 14 slid open with a soft metallic whisper, revealing a cavernous hangar filled with quiet shadows and silent equipment. Most bays at the station held cargo freighters or passenger vessels, but this one was strangely empty except for a single ship resting in the center of the floor. Sophia stopped walking. "Well, hello there," she said softly. The vessel was beautiful in the way expensive machines often were. Sleek curves, polished hull plates, and elegant engine housings that suggested the designers had spent nearly as much time thinking about appearance as performance. The ship was not enormous, but everything about it carried an unmistakable sense of importance. This was not a cargo ship. This was the kind of vessel owned by someone powerful enough to demand both luxury and speed. Unfortunately, the ship was also very clearly dead. Maintenance panels were open across the hull, diagnostic cables hung loosely from exposed ports, and several engineering consoles nearby displayed flashing warning symbols that engineers across the galaxy universally interpreted as something has gone terribly wrong. Sophia's eyes lit up. "Now that," she said, "is interesting." A stack of digital reports sat on a nearby console. She glanced at the first page. Propulsion failure, cause undetermined. Second report, primary engine grid offline, multiple cascading faults. Third report, repair attempt unsuccessful, vessel declared non-operational. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Declared non-operational," she repeated. That phrase always amused her. Engineers used it when they were tired of looking for answers. She leaned against the console and examined the ship again. No scorch marks, no hull damage, no visible structural distortion, which meant the engines hadn't exploded, melted, or been attacked by something unpleasant. That alone made the situation suspicious. Machines rarely failed quietly unless something subtle had gone wrong, and subtle problems were Sophia's favorite kind. She glanced around the hangar. No guards, no technicians, just quiet lights and the faint hum of station power generators. Sophia rubbed her hands together. "Well," she said to the silent ship, "since my transport appears determined to arrive sometime next century, we might as well get acquainted." She stepped onto the boarding ramp. Inside, the ship smelled faintly of ozone and polished alloy. The interior corridors were smooth and minimalist, with integrated lighting panels that glowed softly along the walls. Very expensive, very elegant, very broken. The main engineering chamber was located exactly where Sophia expected it to be, near the rear of the vessel, behind several layers of redundant security doors that were currently wide open. Inside, the propulsion core sat silent and dark. A massive cylindrical engine chamber filled the center of the room, surrounded by diagnostic screens displaying alarming quantities of red text. Sophia slowly walked around the console. "All right," she said thoughtfully. "Let's see what terrified the professionals." She activated the diagnostic interface. Immediately, dozens of warnings filled the screen. Propulsion network shutdown. Safety lock engaged. System protection mode active. Sophia frowned. That's strange. She scrolled through the logs. The shutdown had occurred after a small fluctuation in the energy grid. Nothing dramatic, just a brief spike in the engine stabilizers. Yet the ship's systems had reacted as if the engines were about to explode, which was excessive. Did someone install a safety program written by a nervous accountant? She asked the engine. She ran another scan. The propulsion grid itself was fine. The reactors were fine. The stabilizers were fine. Everything was fine. Except the control system had decided the ship was in danger and had locked down half the engine network to prevent imaginary damage. Sophia stared at the display. Then she laughed. "Oh, this is wonderful." She pulled up the control algorithms. There it was, a safety protocol so cautious it practically panicked whenever the engines cleared their metaphorical throat. "Let me guess," Sophia said to the empty room. "You saw a tiny fluctuation and immediately decided the ship was about to explode." The engine core, being a machine, offered no defense. Sophia cracked her knuckles. "Don't worry," she said cheerfully. "We're going to teach you the difference between danger and mild inconvenience." She opened the system editor. Outside the ship, the silent hangar lights continued their steady glow while the station drifted through orbit. Inside the engineering chamber, Sophia began rewriting the logic of a starship that several highly trained professionals had already abandoned. And somewhere deep within the propulsion system, the first faint hum of awakening power began to stir. The first thing Sophia did after rewriting the safety logic was lean back in the engineer's chair and stare suspiciously at the console. "All right," she said to the silent machinery. "Now the question is, are you actually broken, or have you simply been emotionally overreacting?" The propulsion core responded with a quiet electronic hum. Sophia narrowed her eyes. "Don't look at me like that. I've seen engines pretend to be dead just to avoid working." She tapped a few commands into the console and rerouted a small diagnostic pulse through the propulsion grid. The energy flowed through the system like a cautious traveler walking through unfamiliar territory. The monitors flickered as each subsystem responded. Reactor, stable. Fuel chambers, stable. Magnetic containment, stable. Stabilizer rings, stable. Sophia leaned forward slowly. "Well, that's suspicious." According to the previous reports, the engine network had suffered multiple cascading failures. According to the actual machine, everything was perfectly healthy, except for the part where the control system refused to start the engines. "Classic case of a dramatic personality," Sophia muttered. She opened the control architecture again, scrolling through the layers of safety code. Whoever designed the ship had installed an absurd number of automated protections. Every system monitored another system, which monitored another system, which then reported to a supervisory algorithm designed to panic at the first sign of trouble. "Ah," Sophia said softly. There it was, a tiny fluctuation recorded 3 days earlier, a minor power ripple in the engine stabilizers. Nothing unusual for a starship waking up from idle mode. But the supervisory program had interpreted it as a catastrophic destabilization event. So the program had done what overly cautious software always did. It shut everything down. Then it locked the shutdown behind a set of safety protocols so strict that no technician dared override them. Sophia laughed. "You didn't fail," she told the propulsion core. "You had a nervous breakdown." She cracked her fingers and began typing again. First, she bypassed the supervisory lock. Then she rewrote the stabilization tolerance parameters. Then she added a small correction routine to smooth out the original energy ripple. The system protested. "Warning, unauthorized modification detected." "Yes," Sophia said. "That's the point." Another warning appeared. "Modification may violate safety compliance regulations." Sophia sighed. "You know what violates safety regulations?" she said to the console. "Being stranded in space." She confirmed the override. For a moment, nothing happened. The room remained quiet except for the low background hum of station power. Then the propulsion grid activated. Soft blue lights ignited along the walls of the engine chamber as dormant conduits filled with energy. One by one, the stabilizer rings surrounding the propulsion core began rotating slowly, like giant metallic halos waking from sleep. Sophia leaned back with a satisfied grin. "There you go." The system continued its startup sequence. Diagnostics streamed across the display screens in rapid lines of text. Reactor synchronization complete. Magnetic containment active. Propulsion matrix online. Sophia blinked. Well, that was easy. She had expected at least one explosion, or a small fire, possibly a dramatic electrical arc that would singe her hair. But the ship behaved as if it had merely been waiting for someone to tell it to wake up. The propulsion chamber vibrated gently as power surged through the engine network. The giant core in the center of the room began to glow faintly with contained plasma light. Sophia crossed her arms and studied it carefully. "Don't get too excited," she warned. "We're not flying anywhere yet." She initiated a series of stress tests. Energy levels climbed. Stabilizers adjusted. The propulsion rings accelerated slightly as the engine simulated a low-power thrust cycle. Everything remained stable. Suspiciously stable. Sophia frowned. "I don't trust this," she said. She leaned closer to the display, scanning the deeper diagnostic layers. The ship's systems were sophisticated, far more advanced than the average civilian vessel. The architecture suggested military-grade engineering combined with luxury modifications. Whoever owned this ship had excellent taste and an excellent budget. "Which raises a very important question," Sophia said thoughtfully. She tapped another command. The ship's registry file opened on the screen, but instead of a normal ownership record, the file displayed a long chain of encrypted authorization tags. Sophia whistled. "Oh, you're one of those ships. Government, or royalty, or someone important enough that their starship's ownership record required encryption stronger than most banking networks." Sophia leaned back in the chair. "Well," she said after a moment, "that explains the dramatic safety protocols." She glanced around the engine room again. "Still," she added, "whoever you belong to owes me a better coffee than the station cafeteria." The ship hummed louder as the propulsion core reached full operational readiness. Sophia watched the final diagnostic lines appear on the display. Primary propulsion network, fully operational. System stability, nominal. She blinked again. That's it. No hidden faults, no secondary failures, no mysterious alien technology. Just a frightened control algorithm that needed someone brave, or irresponsible enough to ignore it. Sophia stretched her arms above her head. "Well, mystery solved." She stood up and walked slowly around the propulsion chamber, inspecting the stabilizer rings as they rotated with perfect balance. A beautiful machine. Elegant, powerful, and now very much alive. Satisfied, Sophia shut down the test cycle and returned the engines to standby mode. The propulsion core dimmed to a quiet glow. "Good job," she told it. Then she glanced at the clock on the wall. Her transport was still delayed. "Another 4 hours." Sophia groaned. "Well," she said, grabbing a maintenance cloth to wipe grease from her hands, "at least the universe provided some entertainment." She walked toward the exit ramp. Behind her, the silent starship waited patiently in the hangar. Fully repaired, fully operational, and belonging to someone who, at that exact moment, had absolutely no idea their supposedly dead royal vessel had just been fixed by a bored engineer looking for something interesting to do. Sophia spent the next hour doing something engineers rarely admitted enjoying. She admired her work. Not loudly, of course. Engineers had reputations to maintain. But she leaned against a console in the quiet hangar, arms crossed, occasionally glancing at the silent ship with the satisfied expression of someone who had just solved a puzzle that many others had declared impossible. The propulsion system remained in standby mode, glowing faintly beneath the hull like a sleeping giant that now understood its job again. "Look at you," Sophia murmured. "Perfectly healthy. All that drama for nothing." She tapped the hull gently. "Honestly, if I shut down every time I saw a power fluctuation, I'd still be asleep in my childhood bed." The ship did not respond, which Sophia considered slightly rude. She wandered around the vessel, examining the exterior plating more closely now that she had time to appreciate it. The design was elegant in a way that suggested both artistry and expensive engineering contracts. Smooth alloy surfaces reflected the hangar lights in soft waves, and there were symbols along the hull, small ones, very official-looking ones. Sophia squinted. "Huh." She leaned closer. The emblem was unfamiliar at first glance, But something about the shape tugged at her memory. A stylized star surrounded by curved silver lines. Simple but unmistakably deliberate. She tapped the side of the hull again. Who exactly owns you? The ship, once again, chose not to answer. Sophia shrugged and began packing away the scattered tools she had borrowed from the station maintenance lockers. Engineers had a complicated relationship with borrowing tools. The unspoken rule was simple. If you returned them cleaner than you found them, the universe generally forgave you. She wiped grease from a plasma wrench and placed it back into the case. That was when the hangar lights changed. At first it was subtle, a shift in brightness. Then the quiet hum of the station grew louder as security drones glided down from the ceiling rails. Their scanning beams swept across the floor in smooth blue lines. Sophia froze. That's new. Footsteps echoed in the distance. Not casual footsteps, marching, disciplined. Sophia slowly turned toward the entrance of Docking Bay 14. The massive hangar doors slid open with a heavy metallic sound, and a line of uniformed guards entered the bay. Royal Guards. Even someone who spent most of her life inside engine compartments could recognize that kind of armor. Polished plates, elegant energy rifles, and the unmistakable posture of people who were trained to look intimidating, even when standing still. Sophia blinked. Well, she whispered, this escalated quickly. The guards spread out across the hangar, scanning the area with professional efficiency. Several of them stopped when they noticed the starship's engine lights glowing faintly. One guard turned sharply toward the others. The propulsion grid is active. Another checked a handheld scanner. That's impossible. Sophia quietly stepped behind a stack of cargo crates. Very possible, she muttered. More voices echoed from the corridor. Important voices. Important voices always sounded slightly irritated, as if the universe had inconvenienced them by existing. The guards immediately straightened. Then the room fell silent. Sophia peeked around the edge of the crate. A woman stepped into the hangar. She moved with calm authority, the kind that required no announcement. Her clothing was regal but practical, dark metallic fabric woven with subtle armor plates that caught the light as she walked. Her face looked human, almost, except for the long, elegant ears rising from her silver hair. Sophia's eyes widened. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh no!" Queen Terran of the Orion system was not someone you accidentally repaired a starship for. Terran walked slowly toward the vessel, her sharp eyes scanning every detail of the hangar. The quiet glow of the engine lights reflected in her gaze as she stopped beside the ship. For a moment she simply stared. Then she spoke. "The propulsion system is active." One of the royal engineers stepped forward nervously. "Yes, Your Majesty, but that cannot be correct. We ran every diagnostic." "The ship is clearly powered," Terran interrupted calmly. The engineer swallowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." Terran placed a hand lightly against the hull. The ship responded with a faint, content hum. Her eyes narrowed. 3 days, she said quietly. No one spoke. "For 3 days," she continued, "I was informed that this vessel was beyond repair." Another engineer shifted uncomfortably. "That was the professional assessment, Your Majesty." Terran slowly turned toward them. "And yet," she said, her voice calm but dangerously curious, "my ship appears to disagree." The propulsion system hummed again, as if supporting her argument. Several guards exchanged confused glances. One technician checked the console again. "Full engine readiness," he whispered. Terran looked back at the ship. Then she raised her voice slightly. "Who repaired my ship?" The question echoed through the enormous hangar. No one answered. The royal engineers stared at each other, silently calculating how badly this situation could affect their careers. Terran folded her arms. "I will ask again." Her gaze swept across the room. "Who repaired my ship?" Sophia sighed behind the crate. "Well," she muttered, "this is awkward." She wiped the last bit of grease from her hands on a cloth. Then she stepped out from behind the cargo stack. Several guards immediately raised their weapons. Sophia raised one hand politely. "Hello," she said. Every eye in the hangar turned toward her. She offered a friendly smile. "I think," she said carefully, "you might be talking about me." The hangar became so quiet that Sophia could hear the faint ticking of cooling metal somewhere behind the ship's engine housing. Several guards stared at her as if she had just stepped out of an airlock without a helmet. One of them blinked. You? What? Sophia pointed politely toward the starship. The engine, she said. I fixed it. The guard looked at the ship, then at Sophia again, clearly attempting to decide whether this was a joke. Queen Taryn said nothing at first. Her gaze remained fixed on Sophia with the calm intensity of someone examining a very unusual object. Sophia shifted her weight. Before anyone panics, she added, it didn't explode. One of the engineers near the console coughed loudly. That was not the concern, he said stiffly. Sophia glanced at the diagnostics panel behind him. Oh, she replied, then you didn't read your own safety logs. Several technicians looked offended. Taryn slowly stepped forward. Her presence had a strange effect on the room. Even the guards seemed to move slightly aside as she approached Sophia. Up close, Sophia could see the subtle details that made the queen unmistakably alien. Her long ears curved gracefully behind her silver hair, and her eyes had a faint reflective glow that suggested a biology adapted to different starlight. But what caught Sophia's attention was not her appearance. It was the look on her face. Curiosity. Taryn stopped a few steps away. You repaired my vessel, she said. Sophia nodded. Yes. The queen glanced toward the propulsion indicators glowing along the ship's hull. It was declared beyond repair. Yes, Sophia said again. The silence stretched for a moment. Then Taryn spoke calmly. How? Several engineers immediately straightened, clearly hoping the question would expose some catastrophic mistake. Sophia scratched the back of her head. Well, she began thoughtfully, the short version is that your ship had a panic attack. The nearest technician made a choking noise. Taryn raised an eyebrow. A panic attack? Sophia gestured toward the propulsion chamber. Your propulsion network wasn't damaged. The supervisory safety algorithm misinterpreted a minor stabilizer fluctuation as a critical failure. Then it shut down half the engine grid and locked the system behind compliance protocols. The Royal Engineers stared. One of them opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That is not possible, he finally said. Sophia shrugged. I understand the feeling. I was disappointed too. I was hoping for something more dramatic. She walked toward the nearest console and tapped a few commands. Diagnostic logs appeared across the screen. See here, she said, pointing. Energy ripple, completely harmless. But your control logic assumed it was catastrophic. Then your safety system escalated the shutdown. One of the technicians leaned closer. His expression slowly changed from skepticism to confusion. That should not trigger full lockdown. Exactly, Sophia said cheerfully. But your supervisory algorithm was written by someone who clearly believed the best way to protect a starship is to treat every tiny fluctuation like the universe is ending. A guard near the door quietly tried not to laugh. Another engineer frowned. We followed the approved diagnostic procedures. Sophia nodded sympathetically. Yes, that's why you couldn't fix it. The technician blinked. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense, Sophia replied. Your procedures kept confirming the shutdown without asking why the shutdown happened. She leaned against the console. So I asked why. Taryn's eyes had not left Sophia during the entire explanation. And your solution? The Queen asked. I rewrote the stabilization tolerance thresholds, corrected the faulty logic loop, and told the engine control system to relax. The hangar remained silent. One of the engineers whispered something to another technician. Sophia glanced around. What? The man hesitated. That took our team 3 days to analyze. Sophia smiled politely. I had good motivation. What motivation? My transport is delayed. For the first time, Queen Taryn's expression shifted. Not anger, not skepticism, amusement. A quiet laugh escaped her before she could stop it. The sound surprised everyone in the room. Taryn looked again at the glowing propulsion grid. You repaired a royal starship, she said slowly, because you were bored. Sophia nodded. And the coffee here is terrible. A guard actually snorted before quickly regaining composure. Taryn stepped closer. Very close now. Her gaze moved between Sophia and the ship again, as if trying to reconcile the simplicity of the explanation with the scale of the result. Then she spoke softly. You realize this vessel is my personal transport. Yes, Sophia said. You knew that? No. Taryn tilted her head slightly. You repaired it without knowing who owned it. Yes. And if it had belonged to a criminal warlord? Sophia shrugged. Then he would owe me a favor. The Queen stared at her for another long moment. Then something unexpected happened. Relief. 3 days of frustration, technical failure, and delayed travel had quietly built inside her. Seeing the impossible problem solved so easily cracked the tension all at once. Before anyone could predict her movement, Taryn stepped forward and kissed Sophia on the cheek. The hangar froze. Sophia blinked. The guards froze. The engineers froze. Even the propulsion core seemed to pause its gentle humming. Taryn stepped back immediately. For a second, she looked almost as surprised as everyone else. Sophia slowly touched her cheek. Well, she said carefully, that was unexpected. One of the technicians dropped a data pad. Taryn cleared her throat. That, she said with regal composure, was gratitude. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. Good. She pointed toward the ship. Because if it was payment, I might have to repair something else. For several seconds after the kiss, the entire hangar seemed to forget how to function. Sophia stood perfectly still, one hand still touching her cheek, staring at the Queen as if she were trying to determine whether the universe had just malfunctioned. One of the royal guards blinked 3 times in a row. Another guard slowly lowered his weapon, though no one had actually ordered him to raise it in the first place. A technician coughed. Then another one coughed louder, as if trying to restart the atmosphere. Queen Taryn straightened with royal dignity, but there was a faint color on her face that had not been there before. That, she said calmly, was a gesture of gratitude. Sophia nodded slowly. Yes, she replied. You mentioned that. She paused. I just wanted to confirm the galaxy still obeys the laws of physics. One of the guards turned his head sharply to hide a smile. Taryn folded her arms behind her back and looked at the propulsion indicators again, as if the ship might help restore the sense of order in the room. It did not. The propulsion core hummed quietly, entirely unconcerned with royal protocol. Taryn glanced back at Sophia. You repaired a vessel that 32 certified engineers declared irreparable. Sophia shrugged. 32? The nearest technician winced. It was a collaborative effort. Ah, Sophia said. That explains it. Several of them looked offended. Sophia held up her hands. No, that's not criticism. Collaboration is wonderful. It just sometimes results in very complicated ways of confirming something is broken. One of the engineers adjusted his glasses defensively. We followed proper diagnostic procedures. Yes, Sophia said again. That is the correct way to analyze a malfunction. Sophia nodded politely. It is also the correct way to miss the obvious. The engineer opened his mouth, closed it again. Taryn watched the exchange with growing interest. You ignored the official repair protocol, the Queen said. Sophia nodded. Yes. You rewrote the control logic. Yes. You bypassed a royal safety lock. Sophia hesitated. Technically. One of the guards leaned toward another. What does technically mean? It means yes, the other whispered. Taryn tilted her head slightly. You are aware that modifying a royal propulsion system without authorization is illegal. Sophia thought about that. Then she pointed toward the ship. Yeah, she said, but the ship works now. The propulsion grid responded with a soft, perfectly stable hum. Taryn glanced toward the engineers. Does the ship work? A technician nervously checked the console again. All systems operational, Your Majesty. Another engineer ran a secondary diagnostic. No structural anomalies. A third one sighed. The repair is elegant. Sophia smiled. Thank you. Taryn's expression changed slightly at that word. Elegant. It was not the word usually used when engineers described emergency repairs. Most of the time, the words involved phrases like temporary workaround or please do not touch this panel again. Yet the diagnostics showed perfect system balance. The Queen stepped toward the console and studied the updated control architecture. You simplified the supervisory logic. Yes. You removed 5 redundant safety loops. They were arguing with each other. That is not how safety loops function. Sophia pointed at the screen. They were. One of the engineers leaned closer. They were. Taryn looked at Sophia again. You corrected the stabilizer tolerance thresholds. Yes, that requires a full understanding of Orion propulsion architecture. Sophia shrugged. I read quickly. Another guard finally failed to suppress a quiet laugh. The tension in the room began to dissolve. Even the technicians looked less offended now and more puzzled. One of them spoke cautiously. How long did the repair take? Sophia thought about it. Well, I spent about 20 minutes trying to understand why the safety system was panicking. And the rest? 3 hours convincing it to calm down. The engineer stared. You repaired a royal propulsion network in 3 hours? Sophia frowned. 4 hours, technically. Why 4? I took a break to complain about the station coffee. A guard near the door nodded in agreement. It is very bad. Taryn pressed her lips together, trying not to smile again. Then she asked quietly, Why did you help? Sophia blinked. Help? You had no obligation. Oh, Sophia glanced toward the ship. Well, it looked lonely. Several people looked confused. And broken machines bother me, she added. The propulsion system hummed again, as if pleased with the explanation. Sophia leaned casually against the console. Also, I was bored. Taryn stared at her. You repaired the royal vessel of an interstellar queen because you were bored. Sophia nodded. Yes. The queen shook her head slowly. Then, to the surprise of everyone present, she laughed. Not politely, not quietly, actually laughed. The sound echoed through the massive hangar, startling several guards who had clearly never heard such a thing during official duty. Taryn looked at the glowing ship again, then back at Sophia. Engineer Sophia. Yes? You may be the most unusual person I have met in a very long time. Sophia thought about that. Good unusual, she asked, or the kind that gets escorted off the station? For a moment, Queen Taryn did not answer. She studied Sophia carefully, the way a commander studies an unfamiliar star map that might lead either to a discovery or to disaster. The hangar lights reflected faintly in her eyes, and the quiet hum of the repaired propulsion system echoed softly through the chamber behind them. Sophia waited. She had learned long ago that silence made important people uncomfortable. Engineers, however, had excellent patience. Machines taught that skill very effectively. Finally, Taryn spoke. That, she said slowly, depends on how much trouble you intend to cause. Sophia considered the question honestly. I usually cause trouble accidentally. One of the guards coughed again. Taryn raised an eyebrow. That does not sound reassuring. It's not supposed to be, Sophia replied cheerfully. The queen turned back toward the starship, placing her hand lightly against the smooth hull again. The vessel vibrated gently with contained power, its engines now perfectly balanced. 3 days of frustration had ended in a few hours, and not by the people she had trusted. Her gaze returned to Sophia. You are not part of the Royal Engineering Corps. No, you are not registered with any official technical authority on this station. Also no, you ignored safety regulations. Yes, you bypassed encrypted system locks. Technically, yes. And yet, Taryn continued calmly, my ship works. Sophia smiled. That part is important. Behind them, one of the Royal Engineers shifted uncomfortably. He had spent the past several minutes rerunning diagnostics, clearly hoping to discover some hidden flaw that would restore the dignity of the official repair team. Unfortunately, the ship continued behaving perfectly. He sighed. Your Majesty, the propulsion matrix is performing better than it did before the malfunction. Taryn looked back at him. Better? Yes. He hesitated. The stabilization curve is smoother. Sophia brightened. Oh, good. I thought that adjustment might help. The engineer looked at her with a complicated expression that mixed irritation, admiration, and professional humiliation. You optimized the harmonic stabilizers. Yes, that modification alone should require weeks of testing. Sophia shrugged. I ran a simulation. When? While waiting for the safety system to stop panicking. One of the guards laughed out loud this time. The tension in the room dissolved further. Taryn folded her arms again, watching Sophia with growing curiosity. You speak about starship engineering the way artists speak about painting. Sophia blinked. That's probably the nicest insult I've received today. It was not an insult. It's still early. The Queen studied her for another moment. Then she made a decision. Walk with me. Several guards immediately straightened. Sophia glanced around. Is that an order? Yes. Good, Sophia said, because if it was a suggestion, I would have had to ask where. Taryn turned and began walking toward the open hangar doors. Sophia followed. The guards moved aside, forming a respectful path as the two women left the immediate circle around the ship. Their footsteps echoed softly across the polished metal floor. After a moment, Taryn spoke again. You said your transport was delayed. Yes. Where were you traveling? Technically, the Vega transfer ring. Technically? Sophia sighed. I follow interesting machines. That is not a destination. It works surprisingly well. They reached a quiet section of the hangar where the noise of the technicians faded behind them. The massive station windows stretched across the wall, revealing the vast curve of the rust-colored planet below. Taryn stopped there. Sophia joined her, staring out into space. That planet looks like someone spilled cinnamon across the universe, she said thoughtfully. Taryn blinked. I have never heard it described that way. Most engineers aren't poets. You are not a poet either. No, Sophia agreed, but I do enjoy confusing royalty. Taryn allowed herself another small smile. Then she asked the question that had been forming in her mind since the moment Sophia stepped out from behind those crates. Why did you not follow the established procedures? Sophia leaned against the window railing. Because they weren't working. That is not a sufficient reason. It is for engineers. Taryn turned toward her. Procedures exist for safety. Yes, Sophia said, and sometimes they exist to prevent people from thinking. The Queen said nothing. Sophia continued more quietly now. Your engineers are very smart people, but they trusted the system more than their own curiosity. When the safety algorithm said the engines were in danger, they believed it. And you did not. No. Why? Sophia shrugged. Because the engines weren't scared. Taryn blinked. That is not a technical explanation. No, Sophia said, but machines have patterns. When they're actually failing, the behavior looks different. Your ship wasn't sick. She tapped the window, railing lightly. It was just overprotected. For several seconds, the Queen simply watched her. Then Taryn spoke slowly. You solved a problem that 32 engineers could not solve. Yes. You did it by ignoring the rules. Yes. You also improved the ship. That was a bonus. The Queen turned fully toward Sophia now. Engineer Sophia. Yes? How would you feel about repairing something much more complicated than a starship? Sophia frowned. That depends. On what? Does it also panic over minor fluctuations? Taryn tilted her head slightly. Often, Sophia sighed. Then it sounds exhausting. The Queen's eyes glinted with quiet amusement. Good, she said, because it is my government. Sophia stared at Queen Taryn for several seconds. Then she slowly turned her head toward the massive starship behind them. Then back to the Queen. I repaired one engine, she said carefully, not an entire civilization. Taryn leaned lightly against the railing beside the station window, watching the dusty planet rotate slowly below. I did not say it would be easy. That is not comforting. It was not meant to be. Sophia sighed and crossed her arms. The hangar behind them had returned to life. Technicians were still scanning the ship, as if hoping it might suddenly break again out of sheer professional pride. Unfortunately for them, the propulsion system continued humming with smug stability. Your engineers hate me now, Sophia said. They are confused, Taryn replied. That is worse. They will recover. Will their careers recover? Taryn tilted her head slightly. That depends on how quickly they learn. Sophia looked out the window again. The planet below was enormous and silent, a world full of cities and oceans and complicated political systems she had absolutely no interest in understanding. Your government, she said slowly, is not an engine. No, you cannot just open a panel and adjust the logic loops. Sadly, no. Sophia sighed again. That seems like a design flaw. Taryn smiled faintly. It is. They stood quietly for a moment while a cargo freighter drifted slowly past the station, its engines glowing blue against the darkness of space. Finally, Sophia spoke again. You were serious? Yes. You want me to work for you? Yes. Sophia rubbed her temples. I travel the galaxy repairing machines. I know. I avoid complicated politics. I know. I accidentally insult important people. I noticed. And your solution to all of that, Sophia said, turning toward her again, is to put me inside a royal court. Yes. Sophia stared at her. That sounds like the worst possible idea. Terran nodded. It probably is. Sophia blinked. You are very calm about that. The Queen folded her arms again. For years, my advisors have followed every tradition, every regulation, every carefully constructed procedure designed to keep the empire stable. And sometimes stability becomes stagnation. Sophia frowned. That sounds like the engine safety algorithm again. It is very similar. The propulsion system behind them hummed softly as if agreeing with the comparison. Terran glanced back toward the ship. You did not repair my vessel by following rules. No. You asked the right question. Sophia shrugged. It was a very obvious question. It was not obvious to them. Sophia leaned back against the railing. Machines don't care about rules. They care about reality. Terran's expression softened slightly. Governments are not very different. Sophia looked at her again. You want someone who questions everything. Yes. You want someone who ignores tradition. Yes. You want someone who occasionally causes panic in highly organized systems. Terran's eyes glinted. Yes. Sophia sighed. You could have just said you wanted chaos. I prefer the word curiosity. The two of them stood quietly for another moment. Finally, Sophia asked, what exactly would my job be? Terran considered the question. Royal Engineer. That sounds dangerously official. You would oversee experimental projects, technological development, and fleet innovation. That sounds complicated. It is. And if I disagree with your advisors, they already disagree with each other. And if I disagree with you? Terran met her gaze calmly. Then we will argue. Sophia studied the Queen for a long moment. You kissed a stranger in a hangar. Yes. That is not typical royal behavior. No. You offered that same stranger a position inside your government. Yes. Sophia scratched the back of her head. You might be slightly reckless. Terran smiled. Possibly. Behind them, one of the engineers suddenly shouted from the ship. Your Majesty! Terran turned. Yes? The technician looked both annoyed and impressed. We cannot find a single fault in the propulsion grid. Sophia raised a hand. You're welcome. The engineer sighed. That was not the problem. What is the problem? He gestured helplessly at the console. The engine efficiency has increased by 12%. Sophia blinked. Oh. The man frowned. How did you do that? I removed 5 unnecessary safety loops. That should not improve efficiency. They were arguing. The technician stared at her. Terran laughed quietly again. Then she looked back at Sophia. Well? Sophia exhaled slowly. Her transport announcement suddenly echoed across the station speakers. Departure notice. Vega transfer ring shuttle arriving at docking bay 7. Sophia looked toward the distant corridor where the transport would soon appear. Then she looked at the starship. Then at the Queen. Well, she said slowly, I suppose repairing one government cannot be more complicated than repairing that engine. Terran's expression brightened slightly. Is that acceptance? Sophia shrugged. Let's call it an experiment. The Queen extended her hand. Welcome to the Royal Engineering Corps. Sophia shook it. Do I get better coffee? Yes. Then I'm definitely staying. Behind them, the repaired starship hummed quietly, its engines balanced and ready. And somewhere deep within the vast systems of an interstellar empire, a few very old rules were about to be rewritten.